Welcome to Nervous System Regulation in the Backcountry, Understanding Safe Enough Space. This is a presentation that was done in collaboration with Mountain Mentors in March 2022. The end of the presentation used to have about a 20-minute Q&A, which has been removed for the privacy of the folks who showed up. But I hope you enjoy, and please let me know if you have any questions.
welcome to Nervous System Regulation in the Backcountry by the lovely Sydney Badger. Since we're all calling in from different places around BC and also as mountain mentors serves communities in Greater Vancouver, Squamish, Whistler, and Pemberton, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we operate on the ancestral and unceded lands of Kwetlam, Kakai, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Sloho, Stithmac, and the Little peoples. If this is unfamiliar to you, or if you have not heard of those names before, I'd encourage you to take some time after tonight's session and to just visit native-land.ca. It's been an excellent resource for me to become more familiar with the lands that I am residing on. And as always, this acknowledgement is not an endpoint, but rather a starting off point for the reflection of the history of the lands that we learn, recreate, and are in relationship with. So thank you for taking that moment with me. A couple of housekeeping things for tonight. This event is a workshop, so we're here to learn, ask questions. If questions come up for you in the meantime, please feel free to type them into the chat. They will be addressed at the end of the program, so don't worry, your question is not being ignored. There's just a time and place for it at the end of the workshop. Other community guidelines, we are a space that does not tolerate any kind of discrimination. If anyone is conducting themselves in not a respectful manner, I will just remove you because I can hit that button. It's really easy for me. That hasn't been an issue in the past, and I don't think it will be tonight either, but just making that quite crystal clear. Other than that, if you have not heard of Mountain Mentors before, which is the hosting body of tonight, we are a small grassroots nonprofit that operates in the Sea to Sky corridor, focusing on bringing historically underrepresented populations into high barrier mountain sports through a one-to-one mentorship program. And we're really excited to have this space and also to have alongside with us Sydney, who is going to be our presenter today. So without further ado, I will stop talking and pass the figurative mic on to our speaker tonight. Thank you.
Good one, Jojo. Jojo, are you good to take over the letting people in?
Yep, I will monitor people in.
We're bumping, friends. It was like things are happening tonight. Thank you for coming. Yeah, just a lot of yay for that. And thank you to Mountain Mentors for having me in this space, albeit I kind of begged to be here, but I didn't beg. There was no pleading involved, but it was like, hey, can I please do this presentation on this thing that is very close to me? And they said yes. So thank you to Mountain Mentors for being an organization that is open-minded to bringing new information into this field and this industry and this culture. It means a great deal. And it also means a great deal to see so many familiar faces on the participant list. So yeah, to the ones I know, thank you for being here. And the ones I don't, thank you for being here. And the ones who are watching the recording, thank you for taking time to do that. I think that's a serious skill. I'm always like, I'm going to watch the recording. Yeah, no, I'm going to sign up and do the thing. And then like, do I? They just sit in the inbox for a while. So if you're actually hearing this while watching a recording, then bravo. Georgia. Georgia is the only one with her camera on right now, and I'm just going to call her out for being awesome because she is a dear friend of mine, and we met because she was my mentee through the Mountain Mentors program, and we just had a party really all season long. So yeah, feel free to turn cameras on or off to anyone. Obviously, I'll just see the first few that pop up, but as we're about to learn about and speak about, having social interaction and reading people's facial reactions is actually a very important part of feeling safe. It's a cue to our nervous systems that we are okay, that we're here with other people. So I'd encourage you to, yeah, if you feel like having your camera on, no pressure. Also take in the other faces as we learn and watch together. And if you just want to like eat your dinner in peace, turn the camera off, all good. Okay, so without further ado, nice to meet you. A bit of background, primarily because I think it's important that everyone knows where I come from and therefore what my biases are. For example, I'm an outdoor educator by way background as opposed to a certified guide, and those are different paradigms. So other factors that might be worth knowing about me, I'm here because I love to teach, and because teaching is what helps me integrate my own learning. So you being here to learn with me is helping me learn, because I had to create this presentation. And this is this thing I do where I set up a need to share so that I am wonderfully forced to synthesize the information to be able to deliver it. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Nervous system regulation is now how I see the world. It's like a one-way revolving door. One of my teachers says that it's like the Matrix, where you take a red pill and you can't go back. It kind of is, because once you start seeing people for how they're wired, and that their behavior is just a result of their wiring in all facets of life, you can't unsee it. For better or worse, it does give us more understanding. It also can be very frustrating when we become the people who are very aware, watching people do behaviors that they are very unaware of. So you've been warned, it's the rabbit hole. The human factor conversation has a lot of potential for growth, I believe. I believe that we talk a lot about what not to do, more so than perhaps talking about what we can be doing. I know there's good work happening out there in that direction, and I want to highlight that I think we can do better. And this is part of that for me. Other pieces. Okay, so I'm going to just do the quick cold notes of why the heck I'm this person standing here with these various backgrounds. Once upon a time, I thought I wanted to be a ski guide. Then I started doing practicums, did the Ops 1, being in the industry a little bit, meeting great people and learning about what's going on in this thing that we call the ski industry. And I started seeing patterns around nervous system stuff, around traumas that were happening, and started recognizing that there's a whole other thing going on in the ski industry, professional and recreational. And yeah, something clicked for me that it was like, you know, I think being a guide is not my path, but I think being adjacent to that is. And here in this talk is part of that. I've been a wilderness first responder for a long time. I've had a couple of incidents that require deep breaths, and that feels a little bit like a calling card for me in being able to be here and speak to the potential that can come from recognizing our traumas, from working with them, and from processing through them, that it can lead to growth and it can lead to more understanding. And if we ignore them, they won't go away. So yeah, I decided not to be a ski guide and be a counselor instead. I'm still finishing my master, and I'm seeing clients as a counseling intern with supervision. I'm also working to be a somatic experiencing practitioner, which is like, it's the shit. I swear a lot. You've now been warned about too. Somatic experiencing is so cool. It's this practice that helps release trauma that gets stored in the nervous system out of the nervous system. It takes a lot of time. It is not a quick fix, and it is very powerful. There are other somatic treatments, but this is the one that I love. And it's the one that has supported me in my trauma healing. So yeah, I'm not usually a fan of the long intro thing. It's not because I think that you need to know all of my list of credentials as an ego piece. It's, I want you to know my biases, I want you to know my experience, and I want you to know what I don't know, which is a lot. There's a lot of things I don't know. A dear friend of mine has this catchphrase after we both do a lot of like, well, since you asked my opinion and here's what I think, and I give a long spiel about this answer that I'm very articulate about, and then at the very end we qualify it with, but I don't know, I'm not a doctor. And like, that's important. I'm definitely not a doctor, and I'm definitely not an expert in all of these things. I'm very learned and very stoked, and there will always be more to learn. Thanks for being on that ride. And thank you to all of you who are here for being curious. And that is really the MO of the evening, is come in with this curiosity of like, what the heck is this nervous system regulation? I'm sure a lot of us have already been exposed to some of that understanding and some of that background, as well as this conversation around staying safe in the backcountry. These are very catchy words to be in the title of a workshop. And so I'm aware that there could be many, many, many different reasons that have brought us all here today. And I hope that you get something out of it that's what you came for. And I hope that you get something out of it that is not at all what you came for. And ultimately, within all of that, I'm going to request that you be here for you, because no one else can be. So what that looks like is, please take care of yourself. Trigger warning, you know, we talk about regulation and dysregulation. There can be the experience of feeling dysregulated. We can talk about experiences that can sometimes happen and have an exact memory of exactly when that happened. And that can be experienced by our physiology. So I will be offering moments throughout the presentation for us to pause and notice and take a breath. And by take a breath, I mean just like an exhale, because fun fact, when you take giant inhales, it actually activates the body. So like long, slow exhales, and to orient to the space. So let's practice that now. Your invitation, and invitation translation means do it if you like, don't do it if you don't like. Your invitation is to check out your space, notice the corners of the room. If you're sitting on something, you can feel your bum on the seat. If you're standing, you can feel your feet on the ground. This idea of orienting to safety is that when we tell our nervous systems and tell our bodies, hey, I'm actually right here right now. I'm not over there. I'm not in that memory. I'm not in that thought pattern. I'm just in this physical, tangible space, then we can help our system stay here. We can help our system regulate just by saying, right now I'm actually safe. Unless, of course, right now you're not safe. In that case, I would hope that you can find somewhere safety. The picture of the plant is because orienting to plants, like house plants, the view outside, a pet, those are all great things to bring our attention to and for helping to regulate. Oh, there we go. And so then in the big picture, why are we here? There are some us factors and there are some other people factors. I've heard so many people talk about feeling irrationally nervous in relationship to their outdoor pursuits. Like, how come the night before I get so anxious or wrapped up, or like I don't sleep well because I'm so concerned about what's going to happen the next day, and feeling stuck or my worst fears come up. This is so common. If any of you are familiar with these things, like they're everywhere. Then there's the other people factors, the power dynamics, the qualifications, the quote unquote expertise. Expertise is a lifelong pursuit. And the comparison that we put ourselves through of what is the objective that we should be achieving, and are we doing it at the right pace and the right way, and all of these things that culture can tell us are doing things right and wrong. And then what is our reaction to right and wrong, and down the rabbit hole we go. So where are we going to go with this? Well, we're going to start by identifying the problem in the sense of communicating in the backcountry being important and being challenging. And we'll work to understand how can regulation and dysregulation, how can understandings of regulation and dysregulation help us see communication in our backcountry pursuits in a different light. And ideally, how can we recognize the role of our wiring in there? This is kind of a lifelong pursuit. So let's also say, like, we're exposing this concept right now. There is no perfect finish to any of this. And then at the end, we will talk about different kinds of solutions. My hope is to offer you strategies of communication that can fill the gap that needs filling. How we gonna get there? I'm gonna start with understanding regulation and dysregulation, 101, and then we'll talk about social safety in regulation context and how that shows up in the mountains. And then we'll talk about what the heck we're gonna do about it. So, regulation, dysregulation, autonomic nervous system, window of tolerance, and other geeky things. So first stop, what is our autonomic nervous system and what is it up to? When we hear autonomic, let's think automatic. What happens in your autonomic nervous system is beyond our control. It is not something that we can think our way into action. It is an action before we can think about it, because what our system is doing at all times is taking in the surroundings and perceiving safe, not safe. That's it. Am I threatened? Am I not threatened? And so by perceiving this safe or not safe, we then have different reactions in the body. Our breathing might change, our heart rate might change, digestion, because our body then says, okay, I'm going to prioritize different things based on what the threat is or isn't in my environment. So we learn these ways of surviving from very early childhood on, and our systems are very smart. Sometimes they get in the way because sometimes they're trying to keep us safe from something that actually is no longer a threat. And so bottom line, it's this perceived or real threat that is the question. And also knowing that as mammals, we are wired for belonging. So we are herd animals. We always have a subconscious desire to be in connection with others because that tells us that we are safe. We need others to be safe. And we are scanning the environment, meaning also scanning the people, the animals, the whomever. But if we're talking about ourselves in this context, we literally scan facial reactions and interpret them in a flash before a thought can even develop. We have appraised the degree of safety in our environment. So just like this image where one set of eyes and ears perks up, many sets of eyes and ears perk up. If I looked over and went, oh, I guarantee if you're standing right next to me, you're going to look over and be like, what? And for a second, your breath will stop and your heart rate might increase a little bit until we all realize that we're fine. But this is how we are wired. We are wired to react to our environment. And so that happens in a number of complicated ways. Polyvagal theory is this thing created by Dr. Stephen Porges. His writing is very dense. I don't recommend it unless you get like the pocket guide version or watch interviews with him. He's articulate and wonderful, but his books are very dense. Oh, one thing I should have said, and this is to anyone, I'm not going to send out the slides, but please feel free to take photos of the slides. Like if I see a camera right up in the, it's fine. I encourage it. So yeah, polyvagal theory. Before we dig in, let's do a little pause and notice. Just read some of these words. Notice the colors. Notice what words stand out to you. What words feel familiar, what words feel foreign. Some of them might have like a reaction connected to them already. Maybe you already have a definition of what that is in your mind. One that I like to point out is particularly around parasympathetic. I think in a lot of yoga and meditation classes, there's now a bit of a jargon around like, we're just going to drop into our parasympathetic nervous system, which is not wrong. It's one branch of the parasympathetic nervous system, but it's not the whole picture. So this is a bit more of the picture. And on this slide, what I'd really love you to take away from here is that these are all correct. There is nothing wrong with any one of these states, any one of these experiences. I think a lot in our culture, we say like, oh, I'm in fight flight, I gotta get out. It's like, no, fight flight has got your back. Like fight flight is here to do the job. The problem happens when we get stuck there. The problem happens when we have to be in fight flight for so long that our very intelligent system is like, I'm gonna just go ahead and shut down now, because if I don't, like we're done here. And then we go into freeze. If you take your eyes to lookers left of the screen, we can look what it's like to travel through regulation. So regulation would be starting at settled, this rest, digest, chill out, and then hopping up into our engaged social connection safety. We're going to highlight this a lot, the ventral vagal parasympathetic system, and then up into our sympathetic, which is being activated. Like anytime we do stuff, we need to be activated, because if we're not, we can't do stuff. So it's not bad to be in our sympathetic. When we go do our backcountry activities, we will be there. Great. And then over to the right, again, sympathetic, fight, fright until it's too much, and then we crash. This is what we're working with. The idea, the goal is to be in flow and not be stuck. So regulation, again, in a nutshell, if we took regulation to your average day of going ski touring, we wake up, we're settled, we just came out of resting. get our breakfast, whatever. Someone comes to pick us up. Sweet. Now we go into social engagement. We're chatting, we're shooting the shit, we're on our way to the wherever. We get to the trailhead, we're shooting up, we're like, just things are good enough. And then we go for a walk. We start ascending. Now we're activated. And then we pause and have some candy. And then we're back to just being socially engaged because we're taking a minute. We continue on like so. Eventually we decide to ski something, continue to be activated until we're done skiing this thing. Great, we're back to this zone of safety, go team. And then on we go back to the car, relief of safety. And then if you're me, you go have a beer in the bath, total settled. That is an average day of regulation in the backcountry. It doesn't always go that way, but this would be ideal. Let's recognize that this happens without our control. This is in flow, it's in response to the inputs of our environment. On the flip side, dysregulation is when things get a little bit stuck. So when a stressor sends us into overwhelm and we can't stay in that overwhelm forever, this is again where we might come down into the shutdown and a bit of a crash. We all have different thresholds for how long we can stay in fight or flight and then into our crash. But what really needs to be recognized with dysregulation, again, is that none of the states exactly, none of the points are bad. It's not that we never want to be in that state. It's that we don't want to be stuck in that state. And when we're dysregulated, we do not respond appropriately to what's going on in our environment. Instead of responding appropriately, we are always perceiving that there is threat or danger and that we just need to continue doing until we can solve our way out of the situation. And why the lines? So the dotted lines represent the edges of our window of tolerance, the solid lines being the upper edges. So this is also called our capacity for where regulation can travel. However much space we have for regulation is how much more stress we can take in, because there's more space to travel up a bell curve. We can go like, oh, things got real there. All right, good thing we can come down the other side and travel through. Whereas when we have less space, it might be that, oh, that got stressful, and then it's too much. If it continues to be stressful, this is where dysregulation can come into play. So more space is more capacity to flow with ease through stressful events. We can't make life not stressful. We can just make our flow a bit flowier. The good news is these windows are not fixed. They can change. And this important note, that experiences of real or perceived threat, whether from early life or beyond, can reduce the capacity in our window. So this is one of the ways that trauma influences regulation. We don't even have to be in the incident or in the experience to be impacted by the experience. This is where researchers, journalists, filmmakers, first responders, when everything goes okay, we can still have our regulation impacted, even if we're not in the acuity of a situation. As I'm talking right now, I can notice that when I see a helicopter, I think of an evac I had to do. I notice my breath gets shorter, my throat feels constricted, my heart rate is climbing, my cheeks get a bit flushed. These are all physiological reactions I can't control. My voice is even a little shaky. And that's okay. That's part of recognizing what state am I in. Well, I'm getting a little activated because my system is like, I know what helicopters mean. So let's take a sec, for me and for all. Throwing a picture of a helicopter in a backcountry workshop is bold. And I apologize if that was too bold for some who bravely attended. So let's take a moment. Find a houseplant, find a corner, find your seat. After my last workshop, someone was like, I had no idea that houseplants could be so regulating. So they really can. It's just like, take your eyes off the screen, be in the space that you're in and be okay in the space that you're in. Yeah, move it around a little bit. And notice, you know, perhaps in just going through that beginning of regulation, dysregulation, oh my God, information, like that can do stuff to the system. So what's even going on here? All right. You ready? Thumbs up. moving along. Thank you. All right, so regulation in mountain context. How does safe enough space actually impact the communication within our groups? So first stop, what is true about your group that day? What is regulation like that day? And did someone have a domestic last night? Did someone not sleep well? Were they stressed about work? Like, what are the inputs that we might think are irrelevant and are in fact not irrelevant at all, that are already starting to take up space before you even leave your house? This is important to know, really important to know. We need to cater to where the space is and isn't within our group, what is showing up that day. And then we need to recognize that in communicating with our groups in the backcountry, we prioritize connection and we will be more in the window of tolerance. We will have more capacity. We will be more able to tolerate stress because staying in connection keeps us in regulation. Staying in connection with safety, good connection, right? So how can we stay in good connection with our people in the backcountry? Well, step one, picking people that give joy and stoke and bring good candy and tell good jokes. It's not like a light and fluffy, unimportant thing. It's the thing, because if people are able to stay socially with you and you feel safe enough to be the ridiculous version of yourself, that's a pretty good sign that you feel safe with them. And those positive emotions that contribute to authentic connection are a signal of safety to your nervous system. More safety equals more decision for stressors to enter. So you're literally buffering your decision making by being with those safe people. Another, what is your kind of cruise? And by your kind of cruise, I mean like, what's your just right place? Are you the type of person that wants to like hop on a sailboat and be like over in the wind the whole time, cruising on an open water crossing? Or are you like, give me a floaty and a cooler down a lazy river? Those are two very different versions of being on water. There are many different versions of being in the backcountry. Whatever your place is of like, so like Goldilocks just right. Ideally, we want to be with people who share that version because you can all help each other stay in that window. Another thing for safe connection is feeling supported at any time with anything that comes up. And so that means if you don't know something or you're insecure about something, if you feel safe enough to say that and it's celebrated, that is safety. Those are good people. We want to be with people that when you say, I just don't know about this, or I haven't practiced my companion rescue in a long time, or whatever the concern may be, something that might be vulnerable, we want to validate and celebrate. And that will encourage more of that to happen. So slowing down and integrating the priorities. So bonus here is that we can also expand our window by doing our adventure things. I would argue that a lot of us do our adventure thing because it expands our window. We just don't have labels for it in this particular way. When I was doing my undergrad in outdoor leadership, Albert Bandura and his whole research on social learning theory was that when we have people who model behavior in a way that we're like, okay, I can do that. And then they support us in a way that we're like, okay, they supported us through the thing. And then they punctuate at the end and go like, you did the thing. That we can transfer that learning and that capacity to other areas of our life. This is like why summer camps are a thing, because we take people and go, hey, welcome, let's have fun. Look at all these things that you did better. Isn't that awesome? And then that translates into life and the confidence building that happens. And so we can support each other and we can ask for support to expand our own resilience in the backcountry by being with people who support us at our edge. If we're at the edge of our comfort zone and someone's like, you got this, let's go, that resilience is going to transfer into your everyday life. I'm so glad I get to share this picture finally. So bonus, being playful helps us stay in our window. And when we stay in our window, we are going to learn more because we're not being sent all over the place. I would also like to, in a risque asterisk kind of way, like, is it appropriate to teach people who are new to the backcountry to be terrified? Like, really? Is that the best? Is that of service to teach people that they must be afraid and hear all the consequences that can happen to you? Yes, it's important that they know the realities. I do not disagree with that. However, if we are teaching them to be afraid, so they're afraid while they're learning about the thing to be afraid of, are they learning anything? If they're out of their window, are they picking up anything that we're throwing down? Maybe, maybe not. Worth looking into. So another pause and notice. Let's focus on the joy bits here. What is an experience that you remember a feeling of play or silliness or connection, and thus safety in a mountain context? Just like the first one that comes to mind, bring it to your attention. Please notice what happens in your body. There might be like involuntary smile, maybe a little bit of settling into the seat. Like ease happens, perhaps. Even just the folks whose screens happen to be the few boxes that I can see, like there's a relaxing of the facial muscles, even just like the small smile, but everything settles. So just by being in joy and positivity, we can also recognize that our system becomes perceiving more safety. I'm not talking about positive washing either. I'm talking about being in ideal connection with people so that our system doesn't have to think that it's being threatened. Okay, we're going back to the flip side. Sorry, joy was fun, wasn't it? So back to overwhelm and shutdown. What happens on the other side when we get a little too stuck up in our fight and flight, or we get a little overwhelmed and then we maybe shut down? What is happening in our backcountry world that is making this problematic? So there are real and perceived threats that can contribute to this potential overwhelm on our adventures. They could go well beyond the examples that I'm sharing here. These ones are just common. So one is terrain discomfort. If we are somewhere that we don't feel comfortable in, and this doesn't need to be all mountain context, that's just our context right now. On a river, it could be like, I do not want to paddle this set. In a ski kayak, it could be, I do not want to do this crossing. Like, what is the terrain? The waves are too big, the wind is too strong. What is going on that's putting your system into a perception of physical unsafety? And then on the social side, are we feeling outside of the circle? Do we get to contribute to decision making, or are we being shut down? Have we tried speaking up and didn't get listened to? Are we too afraid to speak up because we're afraid of being reprimanded out of the crew? Many different ways that can lead, again, to overwhelm. And then finally, exposure. So the threat to our capacity to be present because we're thinking about consequences. And so, a lot of the time rock climbing, this is what's happening. Like, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall, I'm going to fall. It's like, well, if you keep thinking, I guess you are going to fall. And yes, you might fall. Is it okay to fall? Et cetera, et cetera. Or what if our capacity was able to just focus on what it needed to do next? Again, many nuances of the examples I'm throwing out here, but I'm pretty sure we can all follow along. So we manage perceived threat in different ways. I think this is the important thing to recognize and honor in our backcountry pursuits, is that we all have different ways of, like, things are getting a little yikes, and we all behave differently. There's no one size fit all. we don't get to predict it. It's not like, oh, textbook, perfect. We need to get to know ourselves and get to know our people, because one of the ways that this can manifest, check out the orange line, is some people's coping mechanism that they have evolved in a very brilliant way is things go sideways and their reaction is, I've got this. Don't worry, I've got this. No, we're just going to override. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep going. And that can be really what's needed in some scenarios. And it can be problematic. All of these can be needed and problematic because they're adaptive responses. We've evolved to have them. They're not silly. They have some intelligence, but are they getting in the way of our capacity to communicate in the backcountry? Is someone tapping out? Is someone unable to listen? Many ways, many, many ways. So what are the consequences of overwhelm and shutdown in our backcountry conversations? Overwhelm, like I said, with the orange line, can look like override, and it can look like pushing through. It can look like tunnel vision. It can look like being frazzled. So, let's pause for a second and think about folks who we might validate as having it like really held together. But are they held together? Are they able to persevere and check in with the group? Because if it's one or the other, I ask, where are they in their nervous system? Which one of these is performative and which one of them is real? Someone having tunnel vision in a backcountry context, to me, is like sketchy. If you're not big picture looking at what is going on around you, we need to slow the situation down. And then shutdown. Not great. If someone's not able to cope, things go sideways and they're physically, mentally unable to contribute. They're doing their best. Obviously, it's not that they want to be there, but they're there. Could we have prevented that? Now there's no communication happening. So I'm highlighting these things because I want us to recognize that they're preventable, and also that there are consequences to being in these hyper-activated places that we can't come out of. And if it's happening for one person, it's impacting the whole group. So as much as we need to look out for our own regulation in backcountry context, we also need to look up for the felt sense of safety happening for everyone. Okay, good news part. What can we do about it? I had the privilege of co-facilitating. I was the practicum, but it was my partner, so we're saying co. Accomplishment number one, I co-taught with my partner. We never got into domestic. Accomplishment number two, it was a really awesome course. We taught an AST2 with an amazing crew of humans, and we got into some really deep chats around the fire about human factor and nervous system regulation. And everything that I'm going to say for the next few slides, I want to credit to the conversations we had together, because they helped me realize that the complications and the concerns that we go through in our backcountry communication happen on a timeline. And so let's recognize where on the timeline our communication breakdown is happening, and then talk about what we can do about it on that timeline. So of course, first we can prevent, know the humans we're going with, know how our own system is. Then we can protect, basically like protect your crew, make it great, keep it great. And then we can curate. Once we've got our people, we can dial it in. So what does that look like? Prevent. We're going to prevent yourselves from realizing a misalignment when you're already out. A lot of the questions that came out of this crew was like, okay, but what if I'm standing, like you're on a summit or the objective or the wherever that you are, and it's like, well, no, I don't want to do this. I would argue that there were many opportunities before that opportunity for that to not happen. And so let's not have our most difficult decisions happening at our most high consequence potential moments. So how do we prevent? This is what we came up with. Step one, go on snow dates. Like, go literally date your people, court them, find out if your backcountry people are the people that you want to be in the backcountry with, and start that at the resort. There are people that I would happily ride with at the resort that I would rather not ride with, even in simple terrain. So even that is a big jump. But at least if you're going from resort to simple terrain, you have enough of an out. You can contribute to decisions in enough of a way that you're not exposing yourself to such a degree. Jumping from simple terrain to challenging terrain, that's a huge step. I hope you've dated them once or twice by now. And I hope you've started to realize how they communicate. Did you try to contradict something that they said in simple terrain? How did they react to it? Like, come up with your social tests, and maybe you're going to fall in love with them, and you're going to want to go touring with them till the end of time, because they just make you feel so heard and so validated. And like, that is good touring partners. We all have them, and we all have not them. So let's put some language to the fact that they exist and they don't. And we don't have to hang out with the ones who we don't want to hang out with. And so that brings me on to point B. Be in the welcoming majority is the nicest way I could come up with to say outnumber them. Because if, especially you're taking into more challenging terrain, be with 2 safe people and 1 mystery. And then at least they're outnumbered. You can crowd out their decisions. I'm not saying that ever in the backcountry you want to be voting out someone's decision making, but it's more like if someone's trying to push the envelope and you have enough people that are like, no, I don't really want to push that envelope, that's okay. If that one person is asking to be more conservative, I would hope that that's exactly what the rest of you are going to do. I'm just saying crowd out the ego, potentially. And know your own window of the behaviors that we talked about earlier, of the safe connection behaviors and the not safe ones. Which ones take up too much space for you? Like for me, if someone doesn't listen to what I have to say, or if they undercut me, especially in a group, I will shut down. I'm done. But other things might not bother me, and vice versa. Like we all have our own triggers. So know your stuff. And if people are pushing your buttons, don't try to change them. Just don't go competing with them. Protect. Once you've got your folks, protect the boundaries of your safe people. We had a long conversation in this crew of how do you kindly manage the glom on? What happens when you run into a friend in the parking lot and you're all about to go and they're like, oh, perfect, we'll go together. Like, many of us know that one. It sucks. So I like to think of this one like doing shift work. Like someone calls because they want me to cover a shift at the restaurant. What is the one-liner that gets you out of that shift? You don't need to explain or justify or whatever, but like have your one-liner ready to go. For me working a shift, it was I'm booked. End of sentence. No one needs to know why. That's not as easy in the parking lot, but you could come up with something like, what did we come up with? It was decent. I think it was like a really crafty rain check. Like, would love to go with you another time. Our group has already decided before this morning that we weren't going to change our group numbers. Hope you have a great day. Let's plan another day. Inbound. Like, manage it. Have your line ready though, because it's a sticky situation. Also, glom on once you're out there. Like, I've been out multiple times and had people be like, do you have a map? Like, you don't even have a backpack. That's concerning. Like, be a human and help people out and get them out of avalanche terrain, but also protect yourself. You don't have to take people on. This also goes to protection in the sense of respectfully inviting others into your already very safe dynamic. Please don't be the person that's like, oh, hey, I've never gone with so-and-so, but like, they're going to come, it'll be great. At least be aware enough to say, hey, I've never gone with so-and-so and I have no idea how they're going to behave, but good thing we're outnumbering them. Like, be straight about it. Or go date that person first and then bring them in. But like, respect your crew that you've cultivated. And then curate. Let's develop a process with our people. Once you've got your safe people, like, up your game, because then you can get into this resilience building point. Then you can, I hesitate to say push the envelope because the connotations that means in this particular sport, but I just mean be at your edge in a safe way. You've earned it. You've gotten to that point that you can be. So what are your goals and how can you continue to manage them with your safe people who you trust making decisions with? On that note, collect different people for different things. You might have a friend that's great for like a big fitness explore day because you're basically on low angle terrain the whole time. And you might have someone else that you feel comfortable navigating a storm day with. It's okay if those are different people. You can respect that you make different styles of decisions or you have different capacities. And then curate in the sense of asking in some way. I like this way, it's borrowed from Brene Brown. Like, hey, good morning, out of 100%, where are you at? This is also really great in friendships and partnerships. Like, we need to do a big week, partner. What are we up to? Okay, well, I'm at 40, I'm at 60. Okay, I can handle the dishes and groceries this week. This is the example that Brene Brown gave it in. And so I'm like, yeah, let's bring that here. Where's your cup at? In our AST2 course, we had a gentleman who's in his 60s in a crew of like 30 something. What a champion. And he was just like, yeah, had a terrible sleep. We're all camping in the parking lot, like FYI. And we catered to it, no problemo. But if we didn't create that space, I don't think he would have felt comfortable just being like, oh, excuse me, before we go, I'd like you to know that no way, create the space. And then the last step here with creating that space is we called it pass the ski strap because it was like the talking object. It ended up being a ski strap because someone had it in their pocket and literally passed it around the circle. Okay, do we enter into this bowl or not? Everyone have an opinion. We were on a course. Of course, this might not happen in the same way every time, but let's experiment with that notion. What's it like to give everyone an opportunity to voice what they have to say? Because it's very different passing the opportunity as opposed to what naturally is the loudest person in the group saying, hey, does anyone else have something to add? We've all been there. Like, we can do better. And breathing space into the situation, I'm going to highlight that one more time. When you don't know, when there's overwhelm, when there's like, but should we, but shouldn't we? The winds are picking up, it's already too thick. Just pause. Breathe space into the moment and make a rational decision once you have done so. There's always an extra 5 minutes to make a call, I would hope. Okay, this is a teeny sidebar, but this is in the AST2 textbook as the human factors that are to be considered by recreationalists. And I think they're worth highlighting. Some of them are present within this talk, some of them aren't, but let's just go through for the sake of entertainment. So on the no bueno list, we've got someone's risk tolerance not lining up. We've kind of touched on that. That's like their capacity. Having an expert halo as a problematic behavior, meaning deferring to someone's decision-making and being like, well, I don't know, because you know. So we've talked a bit about that in terms of let's equalize the conversation. Everyone has something to contribute. Familiarity is in the sense of a familiarity bias. Oh, I've been here 20 times. Nothing could ever happen until it does. So that also comes in with the decision-making, feeling safe enough to speak up. Well, maybe it's different this time. Competition and commitment to a goal are more ego-driven. And I think we don't need to belabor those in this space. Showing off, ditto. And then there was one point on psychological condition where they mentioned being tired, etc. I'm like, that's the money. P.S. It's not the psychological condition either. It's the whole physiological condition. Like that one line could be this whole presentation, but I digress. And then on the positive behaviors, we are looking at good communication. We've talked about that a lot. We're talking about leadership. I think we should asterisk the word leadership because we often think of leadership as autocratic in this culture. We're not, unless you are a professional guide, there should not be someone guiding the day. Full stop. Should be a conversation. So what is leadership? What does leadership look like in a group of recreationalists who are traveling together? I would hope that it looks like open and clear communication. Maybe it's someone facilitating a check-in. That's leadership, but it's not stringing along. Patience, having the patience for someone who's having a lower capacity day, having the patience to turn around, and discipline in the sense of process. We want to have discipline like we are airline pilots with how we go through our regimented checking of all the things and communicating about all of the objective information we have access to and have everyone on board with that information. So just want to throw those in there because this is the conversation in the industry. They're all valid, and I think we can make them better. This is a complete sidebar, but I get this question all the time. So how do I know the difference between a gut instinct and a fear instinct? This like, something's piping up, like this niggle, what is it? And my response is, and this is informed by the somatic world, how quickly did it come? Was the response like, this has to happen? Or was the response like a slow creeping, like a train moving through town at slow speed, blowing its horn a million times? Which version was it? If it felt urgent, I would say breathe space into the situation and see if it sticks around. If it's given time to pass, does it? Or is it like, no, I'm still here. Like, I'm pretty clear on this. This analogy of craving chocolate speaks very well to me, and it's very similar. If I'm craving chocolate and I go, I must have chocolate right now, right now. I need to go just fucking tear out a cupboard. Okay, what if I just pause? If I pause, what happens next? Is the next thing that I stop craving chocolate and realize like I just need a nap? Or is the next thing that I'm like, no, chocolate would legitimately help my soul right now. Great. That is very different. So a rule of thumb, is it a fear instinct or a gut instinct? Am I listening to an important niggle or not? Rule of thumb is trust on a downgrade, question on an upgrade. And what I mean by that is if we are making our decisions more conservative because of our gut instinct, I don't see how that can be bad. Why not? Breathe some space, check the gut. The gut still thinks we should be more conservative. Let's do that. If you're like, no, I think my gut really wants to ski this line. I don't know if that's your gut, and we can't know. So if we're thinking of pushing the envelope because of a gut instinct, I think that's where it becomes problematic, and we shouldn't rely on that. We go back to our objective thinking. This whole slide and conversation is highlighted in a great deal of detail in Bruce Kay's book, Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose in the Avalanche Patch. Super nerdy. Go there if you feel called there. So we are beginning to end. How do you show up as a safer person? 1, know the space in your cup and own it. 2, and this is borrowed from a dear friend, become in love with turning around. I want you to be so stoked on turning around that you're toasting to it at the bar. Like, be so stoked on your decision making, even if it looked nothing like what you hoped it did. The thing is, you made good communication and good calls, and that should be celebrated. Initiate check-ins, facilitate space to speak. Those are kind of the same thing. And respect the person closest to overwhelm. We often talk about respecting the person who has the most conservative perspective. The most conservative perspective is probably informed by overwhelm. They're like, no, I actually don't have any more space for this to get any more chancy. If something tips over the edge right now, like, I think we're not in a good place. Which one is it? Is it conservatism or is it overwhelm? Is it informed because of fear of terrain or because there's a consequence that legitimately needs to be considered? Does it matter? Honor the overwhelm. I don't think you can really steer you wrong. This one's kind of heavy, but I'm gonna throw it in there. Okay, the not heavy part is that it's not all our fault. This is like talking about burnout and that we just need to do self-care. Like, no, burnout is an organizational, cultural issue. And regulation, nervous system regulation, and capacity to communicate is a community responsibility. It is not a solo sport. As much as we think this is a solo sport, it's not. And it really depends what's going on. If our dominant culture is like, don't show your weak side because you know you can't do that, then how can you communicate truthfully? You can't be open about your capacity if that's not validated. Take this up another level. And this is a very serious issue in some of the contexts that we're talking about. If being transparent about your capacity threatens your professional world, your only choice is to override or push through. We have talked about what happens when we override or push through. It's not sustainable, and the clarity goes out the window. So in the environments that we are speaking about, we need to be celebrated for being transparent. This needs to change. This is a community responsibility. The final piece on the last heavy slide is honor that our current times are a mess. The world is a mess. We don't need to go into that in great detail, but we all know it, and that takes up space. So it's okay that how you feel now is different than how you felt before the pandemic. It's okay that you don't have as much space and that your goals and objectives might change a bit and that your capacity changes a bit day by day. It's all good. Just honor where you're at and know that it is not all your fault. None of us are broken. None of us need fixing. We all have systems that are doing their very best with the fuel that we have and the situation and the environment and the threats that are coming in. We are doing the best that we can. So let's not pretend that it's not there. Let's just breathe some more space. Okay, final bits. The key connections here. Connection number 1, Safe means different things to different nervous systems. Connection number 2, the goal of being safe enough is to stay in communication. Keep those lines open. 3, we all play a part in having the folks in our group stay online, i.e. support your people so they don't shut down. And last but not least, you have every right to curate your people. So please do it. And finally, some resources if you would like to capture, if you're more interested in more nervous system stuff. These are my 2 friends and teachers and mentors, and Nicole's actually also my employer for some things. They have very cool worlds with more details. If you're curious about nerding out more, there's a list of authors that you can, I'd suggest just like looking up podcast interviews as a starting point, see who speaks to you. And then Bruce Kay's books on there. Oh, I didn't put in italics, classic. And finally, feel free to follow up with me with any questions or seeking of direction to continue that learning. I will say about myself and my practice of a clinician has limited space until we start doing group work, which is of definite interest to me in the future. For now, I have some spots and not many. And what is of great interest, as mentioned at the beginning, is more teaching. More teaching helps me learn. So if any of this speaks to you in a way that you're like, hey, I know my staff training or organization or whatever that layer is could benefit from a rendition of this type of understanding, that is where my current nerd world would like to hang out. And that is it, y'all. Thank you so much for your attention, and the folks whose wonderful faces were smiling and nodding along. That social safety connection reading the room really supported me, so thank you. And I'm going to do the thing where we stop sharing and take questions.
Thank you so much for being here and for watching. If you have any questions or inquiries about counseling or consulting or presentations, here is the contact info to use. Have a great day.